welcome to our training on the National Register Evaluation of New Deal related resources of the CCC, PWA, and WPA. The development of this guidance document represents a true collaboration between the Pennsylvania SHPO and Department of Transportation. The guidance was created in 2020 and 2021 as part of our yearly work plan. Modifications to the guidance reflect the insight gained through resource evaluations completed in 2021 and 2022. I would like to express special thanks to the PennDOT Cultural Resource Unit staff for sharing their expertise and understanding throughout this project. Without their helpful input and assistance, this presentation would not have been possible, especially Kara Russell, Christina Thompson, and Heather Gerling. Their help in gathering information and photos of CCC, WPA, and PWA related resources and participation in the determinations of eligibility added greatly to the development of this guidance. Next slide. Next slide, Barbara. Thank you.
You see it? Okay.
Yep. Here's an outline of the topics we will address in today's webinar. Next slide. No one loves, or at least uses, acronyms more than the SHPO and PennDOT staff, so we are unfazed by using a large collection of initials to convey meaning. Maybe this trend began in the New Deal era. The American public soon became accustomed to using this alphabet soup as a shortcut to refer to government programs, and many of these acronyms have stuck around for a long time, unless they were retired or subsumed in new and better acronyms. Perhaps the two best known and fondly regarded New Deal programs were the CCC and the WPA, both included in this guidance document. Next slide, please. Luckily for us, only a few of those New Deal programs provided funds or a workforce to create or enhance road-related resources, the type of resources often found in PennDOT projects and requiring evaluation under Section 106. So the focus of this research and guidance document is on just those three New Deal programs. The CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, was one of the earliest programs to launch in the New Deal era. It provided immediate relief to unemployed and unmarried young men aged 18 to 25 by enrolling them in a citizen corps of laborers with room and board provided at camps throughout the country, devoted primarily to tree planting, forest management, and public park development. The PWA, Public Works Administration, was a funding program which provided money to communities for a variety of projects. PWA involvement is often unnoticeable in the built environment as a behind-the-scenes funder of projects, but plaques crediting the program are sometimes found in schools and other structures built with PWA funds. The WPA, Works Progress Administration, and later the Work Projects Administration, was perhaps the best known of the New Deal programs. It employed millions of unemployed workers to carry out public works projects, primarily construction jobs, building roads and infrastructure, as well as parks, schools, municipal buildings, housing, and more. The stonework often associated with the WPA can be found throughout the state and evokes appreciation for both its craftsmanship and the people who created it. In many ways, these public works projects have not just endured for almost a century, but have come to represent the resilience of those who survived difficult economic times and left a lasting mark upon our world. It is important to note that while the stonework created by both CCC and WPA workers is distinctive, it reflects the design aesthetic of the time. The Department of Highways developed bridge and public improvement templates that also utilized native stone. So not every early to mid 20th century stone resource reflects the involvement of the WPA or the CCC. While the public improvements of this Great Depression era hold special meaning for many, how do these built features fit into the environmental review process and the National Register of Historic Places? Next slide, please. When evaluating these resources, it is important to note that the New Deal funded or built some truly remarkable public amenities all across the country. It is fair to say that these New Deal programs changed the face of America, affecting such critical areas as transportation, government, public health, conservation, and recreation. Consequently, New Deal related resources are varied, plentiful, and sometimes significant. They include public sewer and water and flood prevention systems, dams, bridges, channelized streams and roads, as well as schools, libraries, municipal buildings, parks, band shells, airports, colleges, sculptures, murals, and recreational sites. Of course, with such an abundance of New Deal related or created resources, not all of them will meet National Register criteria. Simple association with New Deal programs does not connote National Register eligibility. Distinctive stone features, bridges, culverts, retaining walls, and other public amenities can be found along roads and in parks throughout communities. They have undeniable charm and evoke the craftsmanship of the early 20th century. So when are these quaint resources not just scenic, but National Register eligible? This guidance document with a research guide, fieldwork tips, and a checklist of registration requirements is intended to help answer that question. The stone culvert on this slide is one of a group of similar but not identical culverts found in Union Township that required an environmental review evaluation. While not marked or documented as New Deal program related, these stone culverts have the design and appearance of those created under those programs. However, without known or marked association and possessing only fair integrity due to the replacement of stones with cement or metal pipes not visible in this photo, this culvert and the grouping of similar culverts were found not eligible due to lack of significance and loss of integrity. They were not part of a larger created landscape or historic district and not individually eligible. Next slide, please. We approached the process by spending some time gathering information about how to evaluate New Deal resources, utilizing previously developed context from both Pennsylvania and other states. While Pennsylvania had undertaken a context study in 1986 that focused only on CCC-related resources in state parks, several other states had developed more inclusive New Deal contexts. While helpful, these other state contexts consulted from Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Kansas, Arkansas, Indiana, Virginia, and Colorado did not offer a detailed evaluation approach to New Deal resources. Most focused on larger resources and did not address small-scale road-related features like retaining walls and culverts. Some specified that only outstanding and relatively rare road-related resources like overlooks or bridges would be individually eligible. These contexts are available online and are included in Appendix B of the guidance document. With input from a team of PennDOT cultural resource experts, discussions led to the development of the guidance and the checklist to create a standard evaluation process for isolated road-related CCC WPA and PWA resources. After these documents were approved by the team, a series of meetings were held to apply the guidance and the NR evaluation checklist to 18 resources. Discussions during the evaluation process led to some fine-tuning of the document to reflect lessons learned and real-world issues encountered. Next slide, please. This guidance document lays out just when and how it can be used to evaluate NR eligibility. Next slide, please. Please note that the guidance we have developed applies only to isolated road-related resources, that is, those located within or adjacent to the road right-of-way, or association. For association with the CCC, road-related resources must be within or adjacent to state or national parks or forests. Next slide, please. CCC PWA or WPA resources will most likely be found NR eligible either individually or as a contributing property in a larger resource with significance for criteria A, government, social history, recreation, conservation, and or transportation, and criterion C for architecture or design by serving as a good example of the distinctive characteristics of the CCC or WPA craftsmanship and displaying high artistic value. Significance for criterion B, association with an individual, is less likely given that these works were created by groups of individuals and the design of individual resources was often not credited to an architect or engineer or community planner. Significance for criterion D, to provide information about the nature of these federal programs, is perhaps more likely for inhabited places like CCC camps or complexes and less likely for transportation-related resources. Next slide, please. The period of significance is defined as the years when these programs were active in Pennsylvania, 1933 to 1943. Next slide, please. Just as in all National Register evaluations, integrity of the resource is very important, and the 7 aspects of integrity must be addressed in the resource description. A public works project lacking integrity of workmanship, design, and materials would not likely be able to convey the craftsmanship associated with the New Deal era programs and would not be considered eligible under criterion A or C. The property types identified as eligible resources in this guidance document include isolated, individually eligible resources and contributing properties in historic districts. Due to the nature and focus of the CCC program on natural resource conservation and recreation, all potential CCC historic districts would be found in state or national parks and forests, and identified features would serve as contributing properties in the districts if they fit into the POS, the period of significance. Public roads serving and adjacent to these parks and forests could be included in the historic district boundaries if contributing resources are found there or if road improvements can be documented to have been created or enhanced using CCC or even WPA labor. PWA and WPA features can also contribute to other planned landscapes such as local parks, roads, and scenic overlooks. These planned landscapes may include retaining walls with terraces, steps and overlooks, culverts and bridges, and channelized stream beds or dams. The identification of new historic districts made up of these resources is anticipated, since unfortunately a statewide systematic effort to find and document such resources has never been undertaken. These New Deal program resources may also contribute to historic roadways. The definition of a historic roadway is a bit vague. For the purposes of this guidance document, all roads named and recognized as historic routes in a 1930 Department of Highways map deserve some consideration as potential historic roadways. It is assumed some sections of those roadways could retain integrity more than others. No roads have been determined National Register eligible other than the PA Turnpike and a few segments of the Lincoln Highway and the National Road. Of course, not all segments of these roads have been evaluated for integrity. Scenic highways and heritage corridors are likewise gray areas in terms of National Register eligibility. The designations have no intersection with NR status, but resources located along them do merit a closer look. A list of all previously identified historic roads is provided in Appendix A of the document. Next slide. The list on this slide shows the types of isolated road-related resources addressed and identified in the document. Some resource types are far more commonly encountered, such as retaining walls, culverts, bridges, and drainage swales. The photo on this slide shows the 99 steps. a stone pedestrian stair located on Lincoln Street in Shamokin and rebuilt by the WPA circa 1934 and still awaiting documentation and NR evaluation. Online newspaper articles suggest that these stairs have just undergone a complete rehabilitation involving replacement of existing stone. Documentation for a future evaluation. Next slide, please. The WPA landscape on State Route 29 was documented and evaluated utilizing the guidance and checklist for eligibility. This planned landscape, made up of stone retaining walls along both sides of the road, scenic overlooks along the course of the channelized stream, and a related bridge marked with plaques, was determined eligible under criteria A and C. Next slide, please. CCC projects are found exclusively in or near state or national parks or forests. Pennsylvania had the second highest number of active CCC camps in the country, 151. Only California had more. While most CCC work is found in state parks and forests, the CCC was also instrumental in assisting in the restoration and visitor improvement efforts at a few historic sites. The CCC assisted in the restoration of Hopewell Furnace when it was acquired by the federal government to serve as the French Creek Recreational Demonstration Area in the 1930s. Both CCC and WPA workers sometimes played a role in preserving historic properties. The CCC has been the subject of a number of scholarly and popular articles and books. The research challenge is not the lack of information, but sorting through the abundance of books and articles to find details pertinent to your project or resource. The stories of these young men of the CCC are compelling, and the logistical challenge of organizing them into a workforce makes for great reading. DCNR and the PA SHPO completed a substantial context study and thematic NR nomination effort in 1986 entitled Emergency Conservation Work Architecture in PA State Parks 1933 to 1943 with thematic resources. The context identified 24 historic districts in 18 state parks and 1 state forest. But they tend to be very small historic districts focused on CCC architecture, as the context name suggests. A reevaluation of the state parks and recommendations of the context study is needed to update and gather new information. Additional or larger eligible historic districts are likely present, but in need of new documentation. This study is available via PA Share as an online report and is a good starting place to better understand CCC resources in Pennsylvania. A list of the historic districts and CCC overlooks mentioned in the context study are included in the guidance document as well. Next slide, please. The context lists CCC scenic overlooks like the one shown on this slide. Heiner View State Park in Chapman Township. Oops, Barbara, I think you're showing them the wrong slide. Heiner View State Park in Chapman Township, Clinton County.
Pam, Pam, sorry to interrupt. What slide is showing on your screen now?
The right one now. CCC Scenic Overlook, Heiner View State Park.
There's just a bit of a time delay. Okay, sorry.
No problem. Back to the exciting story here. Heiner View State Park in Chapman Township, Clinton County includes not only a CCC built overlook, but a monument to the CCC workers. It is interesting to note that despite being mentioned in the 1986 context, Heiner View State Park, as shown on this slide, has never been evaluated or entered into PA Share or its predecessor, CRGIS. A nearby state park called Heiner Run State Park has mapped boundaries but remains unevaluated. Obviously, the PA SHPO records and mapping system for CCC resources are incomplete, and the data in the context report is now more than 30 years old. A renewed effort to identify and evaluate CCC resources is needed. Neither of these two state parks near Heiner Mountain were identified as containing eligible historic districts in that 1986 CCC context. but the photos certainly show this one to be worth a second look. Next slide, please. DCNR undertook a study of CCC built architecture in Pennsylvania state parks from 1986 to 1993. The data was focused on documenting the buildings and structures, neglecting landscape features, and identifies only the best of CCC architecture in parks. Thus, not all buildings were inventoried or evaluated as well. The Callens Gap State Park Family Cabin District in Todd Township, Fulton County, was listed in the National Register as a result of that context. CCC Camp S54 developed Callens Gap State Park between 1933 and 1941, creating a family cabin area, a day use area, and a road network. This listed district includes 10 cabins in the family cabin area of the park and was listed under criteria A and C. An additional unevaluated Callens Gap State Park district with almost the same boundaries is also mapped in PA Share. This district includes a man-made lake and dam, a beach and bathhouse, pavilions, and cabins built circa 1933. This CCC resource illustrates the need for updated information to recognize all contributing resources and perhaps note changes in integrity since the context study 30 years ago. Next slide, please. This online DCNR map shows the location of all the CCC camps in Pennsylvania and may be helpful for project research. Also check PA Share resource maps and USGS Quad maps to see if a state or national park or forest are located in the project area and to determine if any CCC-related historic districts have been identified within the project APE. A builder search of PA Share by using the name of the builder could be helpful in identifying CCC or WPA resources. Next slide. The PWA was a funding program, not a program that provided workers to construct public amenities. The PWA made loans and grants to state and local governments and also to some federal agencies. This approach allowed state and local governments to choose the projects and the designs most desired for their communities. So it is no surprise that PWA finance projects look much like other public projects of the era in terms of design. Visible proof of PWA involvement occurs somewhat rarely. Plaques acknowledging the PWA as a funding source sometimes appear in schools and other public buildings, such as the one shown here, the Emmaus Borough Hall. The images shown in this slide were found on a very helpful research website, the Living New Deal. Information about New Deal related resources are organized by state and often include both maps and photos on this website. Here is some information about a WPA bridge located in McKeesport. The Living New Deal website is very helpful, not because it is all inclusive, but because it is well organized for a search. All of the resources submitted in Pennsylvania are arranged alphabetically by name. Pennsylvania has 536 resources listed on the website, a fair amount compared to other states, but not all have images or confirmation of their location and association with the New Deal. The website is a useful tool. A graduate student and researcher from UPenn appears to have gathered a lot of data and photos on Pennsylvania sites and entered them into this website. Anyone can add resources to the Living New Deal website. A name and location are required. Photos are optional, but of course very, very helpful, as those of us in our line of work know. Next slide. Alas, there is no handy map or online database listing and showing the location of all the WPA projects in Pennsylvania. Communities had a great deal of input into the development of desired projects. The federal government did not dictate where and how the money was spent. Decisions were made at the local level, and record keeping varied from one place to another. Records were sent to Washington, D.C., but they were often not detailed or well organized and sorted for easy document review by historians. However, the WPA often marked their projects with plaques and date stones, making our work a bit easier. And some PHMC historic markers, or others erected by other organizations, including PennDOT, note WPA involvement in the creation of public amenities like the National Register listed Mother's Monument in Ashland, Schuylkill County, shown here. For unmarked resources, information available in PennDOT district offices regarding the construction of roadways and bridges and culverts may be helpful, as well as some online tools. While the CCC work was limited to natural areas, parks, forests, and game lands, and occasionally historic sites in close proximity to the location of CCC labor camps, WPA projects, which paid workers but did not provide housing, can be found almost anywhere. As the New Deal era progressed, WPA workers were preferred because it was less expensive and less complicated program for the government to run. No need to build camps and provide food and outbuildings to address housing, dining, and bathing needs for the workforce. Plus, cities held many eligible WPA workers that could be deployed from their own homes on the multitude of urban projects. Many previously identified WPA resources have been mapped and evaluated in PA Share. However, not all WPA resources are named as such for easy searching. Many previously evaluated resources had WPA involvement, but it was not documented in the project name or sometimes even in the project description. This NR-eligible stream channelization for flood control in Shamokin includes WPA in its name. Thus, it would appear in a PA Share search for named WPA resources. The documentation prepared for this stream channelization states that in Shamokin, the WPA program was very significant, since almost 25% of the population was unemployed during the Great Depression. It goes on to detail the accomplishments of the WPA nationally. It mentions that during the 8 years of the WPA's operation, workers built 651,000 miles of road and repaired 2,124 bridges, built 125,000 public buildings, over 8,000 parks, and almost 1,000 airport landing fields. Let's take a break for some questions.
I am not seeing any questions in the chat box. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask a question? Okay. There will be another opportunity for questions and perhaps more as we get down into the discussion of the of research, field work, and evaluation guidance. So I guess we'll keep moving unless anybody has questions.
The guidance lays out a survey methodology for CCC, PWA, and WPA isolated road-related resources. Begin with research and follow up with field observations. Primary documents are usually not available, but PennDOT district offices may yield records of WPA or PWA funded projects and resources. Historic maps, like Sanborn maps in developed settings, may assist in the dating of resources, like pedestrian stairs. Please note, just because things look like WPA resources does not mean they are. Compare historic Department of Highways road maps from 1930 and 1940 to help determine if CCC, PWA, or WPA work might have occurred in the project location based on changes observed between those two periods. Check the list of historic roads, heritage corridors, and scenic byways provided in Attachment A to consider if a larger linear transportation resource could be present. Look online for historic images of larger road-related resources, like scenic overlooks, bridges, or parks. Check the Living New Deal website to see if resources are identified in the vicinity of your project. The list is arranged alphabetically by state and project name and municipality. Check PA Share to see if the project is located in or near an identified historic district or resource. Conduct PA Share searches of similarly named or closely mapped resources using the search feature. Check the online Library of Congress WPA project records, although they are often not detailed enough about location and project nature to be useful. Use the DCNR online map of all CCC camp locations if CCC involvement is indicated based on the proximity to parks, forests, or game lands. Attachment C includes a list of all CCC or WPA related resources identified in PA Share as of the time I put the list together. An updated list will be created before the guidance is finalized. This list is mostly useful as a demonstration of what information on related resource can be gleaned using the search function in PA Share. Unless CCC or WPA or PWA appears in the name of the resource, there's no way to look for such related properties. You can also search resources by builder in PA Share to find CCC or WPA or PWA involvement with some success. Unfortunately, even PennDOT bridge surveys do not capture WPA, PWA, or CCC data in an easily searchable way. The National Archives Catalog Record Group 69 is available online to check for possible WPA program projects. However, the catalog entries are only occasionally helpful, as shown in the listing for reconstruction of County Bridge 19, which includes plentiful details. Other entries, like the one at the bottom of the slide, are so general as to be of no use in determining where WPA road construction occurred. Information is stored by county, so it is worth a look if you have a little patience to sort through the somewhat unusual organization of the information. Perhaps some county records are more thorough than others in this archive.
Wow.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Linking New Deal era resources to recognized historic roads is not so simple either. The main named highways in Pennsylvania in 1930 are listed in this illustration of a Department of Highways map available online. Named highways may be considered important or perhaps even historic, but a systematic evaluation of such old highways for NR eligibility has not occurred. Likely, as with all resources undergoing continuous change and heavy public usage, some portions may hold significance and retain integrity, while others will not. Next slide, please. A list of scenic byways in PA may be helpful, but most scenic byways have not been evaluated for National Register eligibility. Some select historic districts are expected, but may not be linked to their scenic highway status. There is no correlation between this program and the National Register. A contributing resource to a scenic byway has no NR status unless that segment of the byway has been determined eligible or listed or is included in a historic district. Field observations are critical, both to document the resource and to provide analysis of the details that affect design significance and integrity. It is important to survey a wide enough area surrounding an isolated resource to determine if a larger created landscape exists. This is especially important since most isolated resources are more likely to contribute to a district than possess sufficient criteria A or C significance for individual eligibility. Field notes and photos should document the setting, design, workmanship, and materials used for each resource. Proximity to other likely CCC, PWA, or WPA resources should be noted, as well as location relative to state parks, forests, and identified historic districts. WPA involvement may or may not be addressed in prior district documentation based on other areas of significance. The field notes of an isolated resource should include information about the size and scale relative to other similar resources in the region or PennDOT district. For example, a short retaining wall of modest height is less likely to possess sufficient significance for individual eligibility as a substantial one. Setting, proximity to other road-related features of the same era and design, such as stone retaining walls adjacent to a channelized stream or bridge. The design, assess the design intention of the feature. Is it utilitarian or built with great artistic consideration and details? Was the feature designed as part of a group of historically or physically related resources or a standalone feature? Workmanship. Document and assess the feature's workmanship, noting if it displays work beyond the common mode of New Deal construction. Note the inclusion of plaques, notable stonework, and ornamentation. Materials. Document the use of local stone and the integrity of original materials. Extensive concrete repairs that cover original laid stone can greatly impact the integrity of the resource. Next slide. Associated property types include historic districts and planned landscapes. Ravensburg State Park, located in Tyodotin State Forest in Clinton County, was NR listed in 1986 as part of the context study undertaken at that time. It is significant for its association with the CCC. At the time of its listing, it had 11 buildings constructed by the men of CCC Camp S-127, stationed at Rouchtown. The camp was active from 1933 to 1937. From the photo above, it includes a dam and lake. A recent project involving repair of a drainage swale on State Route 880 within the boundaries of the historic district resulted in the determination that the swale was small, but a contributing element to the historic district. And here's a photo of that contributing but not very impressive drainage swale. Next slide, please. When it opened in 1940, the Pennsylvania Turnpike was just 160 miles long and stretched from Carlisle to Irwin. It was built with the assistance of the WPA, PWA, and the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. From 1938 to 1940, when the first section of the Turnpike opened, more than 15,000 laborers worked to construct the 160 miles, 7 tunnels, and 300 structures. Next slide. The Pond Creek Bridge on Bear Lake Road, State Route 2016 in Lackawanna County, is a 13.8-foot single-span sandstone arch bridge with a prominent keystone near the Lackawanna State Forest. It was first recorded by the Historic Engineering Record in 1982 and evaluated by the SHPO in 1983 and found not eligible, perhaps due to its small size or the lack of context on WPA resources. It was resurveyed in 1998 as part of the Pennsylvania Historic Bridge Recording Project 2, supported by Habs Hare, PennDOT, and SHPO. The 1998 evaluation stated that, although it is one of many WPA-built structures in Lackawanna County, this bridge is distinguished by the unusual range of rustic craftsmanship, well-preserved condition, and unaltered setting. The stonework of this bridge has an unusual decorative mortar treatment to create the illusion of precisely cut stones. Our team of PennDOT and SHPO reviewers agreed that the Hare observations that this small stone arch bridge is eligible under criteria A, transportation and government, and C, due to its high integrity and distinctive craftsmanship using local stone. The development of this guidance document and checklist made that DOE easier by laying out the necessary requirements for eligibility as an isolated resource. A number of channelized streams have been documented in PA Share, usually built with WPA labor as a flood control measure. Several have been determined eligible, including the one pictured here in Shamokin. Next slide. The documentation for the Shamokin stream channelization noted a rubble stone building tradition in the community, not necessarily one associated with the WPA. Another reminder that this type of rustic stonework associated with the WPA was very popular in the early 20th century, and without documentation, it can be very difficult to determine just when WPA labor was involved. Next slide. Culverts are among the most common CCC PWA or WPA resources encountered in transportation projects. While they are often scenic in natural settings, they are not necessarily significant, especially if they are not part of a larger landscape of similarly designed resources. Their small size would make them low scorers in the PennDOT bridge surveys if they qualified as bridges. Following our eligibility checklist, these culverts, part of a group of 5 similar design culverts, did not meet the threshold of eligibility. They were built over the same stream, but they were not part of a larger historic district. Some of the culverts had been insensitively rebuilt with metal pipe openings or concrete box culverts, and they lacked any WPA marking to demonstrate a direct association with the New Deal programs. They could have been created by the Department of Highways or the county with or without WPA workers. The small size, less than 12 feet, lack of clear New Deal involvement, and lack of fine craftsmanship or exemplary design, and the added loss of integrity led the group to DOE these culverts as not eligible due to lack of significance and loss of integrity. Small features like this drainage swale are very unlikely to hold sufficient significance for NR eligibility. They could, however, contribute to an eligible historic district or other New Deal related resources like the one associated with CCC work at Ravensburg State Park. Next slide. Fieldwork and mapping the extent of the identified resource was very helpful in the evaluation of this short and low laid stone retaining wall. Photos documenting the lack of craftsmanship and the laying of the stone and maps showing its short length helped make the case for a not eligible finding. Next slide. A few pedestrian stairs, usually built within a retaining wall system, have been documented in PA Share. These stairs are present in many communities, often as part of a larger landscaped resource, but mostly unidentified and unevaluated. While the distinctive stonework suggests WPA involvement, it is not always the case. A prominent, more classically designed pedestrian stair in Steelton appeared to date from the New Deal era, but Sanborn maps showed its existence in the early 20th century before the New Deal programs existed. Could the WPA have improved the stairs? Possibly, but more research to document WPA involvement would be needed. And if the stairs predate the WPA involvement and do not follow the WPA stone design ethic, they would not fit as neatly into the evaluation guidance we've developed here. They could, of course, contribute to a historic district if they fit into the period of significance. The Smith Avenue stair and retaining wall in Easton is near but outside the boundaries of the National Register listed Lehigh Canal. This large landscape feature, now mapped in PA Share, is likely a part of a larger resource, but it awaits further documentation and National Register evaluation. Next slide. Despite looking very much like a WPA project, the Hazel Street retaining wall and stairs in Wilkes-Barre, Luzerne County, or determined not eligible since they predate the New Deal era. A site visit discovered a plaque noting construction in 1920, well before the WPA existed. Thus, this retaining wall and stairs do not meet the eligibility checklist under this guidance for New Deal resources. Might it still be eligible under a different context of civic improvements or contribute to a historic district? Of course. Next slide. While few WPA or CC or PWA built or funded monuments have been identified in Pennsylvania to date, more are likely present. The Mother's Monument in Ashland and this Peace Monument within the National Register listed Gettysburg Battlefield Historic District are of grand scale and have documented WPA involvement. Next slide. Some resources are easy eligibility calls due to their design, function, and association. The Marie Antoinette Overlook was mapped and documented in 2006 as part of a heritage tourism effort, but was never evaluated for National Register eligibility. Intended to encourage travel and tourism along Old Route 6, this scenic overlook provided a clear view of former French asylum settlement and has a distinctive design, including viewing platforms topped with conical chateauesque style roofs. A PHMC monument to asylum was erected here in 1931 before WPA involvement with the creation of the overlook design. A privately built 1930s era inn with guest cabin sits across the road from the overlook and is included within the resource boundary. Its association with the WPA, design, integrity, and artistry made it eligible for criterion A significance for government, transportation, recreation, and tourism, and criterion C, design given the artistry of the overlook and its distinctive stonework and design. Next slide. This highway overlook included in the Living New Deal website was clearly National Register eligible. All of the other state contexts on New Deal resources called out overlooks as potentially eligible as individual resources, even when fewer other road-related resources were considered to have sufficient significance for individual eligibility. This overlook was built between 1933 and 1943. It has evidence of WPA involvement with the date stone, and it has 3 of the required features for criterion C eligibility: locally sourced materials, substantial size and scale compared to other WPA resources in the vicinity, and it shows evidence of handwork and craftsmanship in the laid stone and carved plaque. The design of the viewing platforms with their standing stone soldier course and curving walls is also demonstrative of high artistic value. While some stones are missing and there is some evidence of graffiti, the overlook has high integrity and was determined NR eligible for criteria A and C by our evaluation group. The checklist for individual eligibility lays out a straightforward process to evaluate isolated New Deal resources, focusing on the demonstration of criteria C significance for design, workmanship, and artistry. We focused on criteria C significance for individual eligibility because resources with only criterion A significance would most likely not be individually eligible, but rather be part of a larger historic resource. Given the federal government programs that led to the creation of these resources, it seems fair to assume that all individually eligible New Deal resources have inherent criterion A association given their very nature. So individually eligible isolated resources would most likely be significant for both criterion A and C. The checklist states that the resource must be built between 1933 and 1943, show evidence of CCC, PWA, or WPA involvement via written documentation or date stones or plaques or nearby marked or clearly associated resources. Retain sufficient integrity of design, materials, workmanship, setting, association, and feeling to convey its appearance during the period of significance. The resource must also retain at least 3 of the following: locally sourced materials, substantial size and scale compared to other examples in the vicinity, evidence of handwork and craftsmanship such as laid stone, hand-carved plaques, etc., and demonstration of high artistic value via decorative details and ornamentation, and sufficient integrity to reflect the architecture and design as part of their National Register significance. Next slide. For road-related resources to be eligible as a contributing feature in a historic district or linear historic district, the feature must also be built within 1933 and 1943. Although we should note some features may predate the New Deal period and may have multiple periods of significance, but to employ this guidance and checklist, integrity to the New Deal period of significance is required. The contributing resource must have evidence of CCC, PWA, or WPA involvement via written documentation or datestone plaques or similar nearby features. The feature must be located in proximity to other identified New Deal era historic district or linear resources such as a historic roadway, heritage route, or scenic highway. The feature must reflect the goals and accomplishments of the CCC, PWA, or WPA and meet the NR areas of significance for criterion A and criterion C as an example of the distinctive characteristics and methods of construction of the WPA or CCC, and show fine craftsmanship, high artistic value in the execution of specific elements. The feature retains integrity of design, materials, workmanship, setting, association, and feeling to convey its appearance during the period of significance. Hopefully, the development of this guidance and this checklist will help to simplify and standardize our efforts to identify and evaluate these road-related resources. Last slide, please. I would like to end with pointing out that many New Deal resources remain awaiting discovery and documentation as cultural resources. While searching for a WPA fountain mentioned on the Living New Deal website, I Googled upon this very cool WPA stone grotto in Western Pennsylvania on the website roadsideamerica.com. Apparently, when it was built by the WPA to shelter a natural spring in Allison Park, Allegheny County, the spring was capped and the grotto was adorned with a decorative stone disc inscribed Fountain of Youth. In our quest to discover new resources, perhaps we can find the Fountain of Youth as well, and if so, we should all make that a priority in our next year's work plan. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Let's take a few questions.
Does anybody
Thank you,
have?
Pam.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead. That's what I was going to say. There's no questions in the chat, so if anybody wants to speak.
Does anyone
question.
have anything,
Go ahead.
a type of resource or a specific resource that they're thinking about that you're not sure how you'd apply the criteria to in your project area? Like especially any of the small stone features along the roadside, like drainage, small culverts, anything like that. So that was one of the big goals we wanted to get out of this, was to figure out how to evaluate these isolated small scale roadway resources. And I think once you have a chance to look at the documents that Pam wrote up, it'll make sense on how it'll be applicable to our projects. And Pam, I have to thank you. You did an incredible job on this. With Barbara's help, I think it's really going to be a very useful document.
Well, thank you, Chris. That's nice of you to acknowledge Barbara's work and my work on this. It really was a very interesting opportunity to learn more about these programs. To be honest, the big picture is probably more interesting than the small picture. To learn about how the programs worked and how incredibly important they were here in Pennsylvania, and the incredible resources they created was really a great opportunity for me. I must say though, once you get down in the weeds and you're looking at drainage swales and very altered culverts, it made it clear that having written guidance that allows us to evaluate these interesting resources again in the context of all the other things that were happening with these New Deal programs, and have that checklist so that we can demonstrate that we are not disregarding the great importance of these programs in Pennsylvania by neglecting to celebrate every evidence of them here. But I think it was good to put it all down in writing. I think maybe everyone perhaps had these thoughts, as they were looking at things like this in the course of their reviews and their daily work. But I think putting our thoughts together in the document hopefully will help us feel more certain that the determinations of eligibility that are made really reflect our best understanding of the nature of these resources.
I agree. And we're always looking for things that help us to be more consistent between districts. And I think this is a really nice step forward to be able to achieve that as well.
And I have to say, personally, I think that Fountain of Youth is absolutely individually eligible. I don't even know how, effective it has to be, but I'm all on board for giving that a shot.
It's on my bucket list now. Things to see in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, now I have to go out and see if I can find it and document it.
It's really cool.
That's PennDOT's advantage of having all those folks out in the field to track down the interesting things that we catch wind of, but might not have had the time to pursue otherwise.
True. We really appreciate taking the time to do the training this morning and running us through the highlights of what you found and what we worked on.
Well, I appreciate all of you, sharing your expertise as well. And thanks again so much for all the photographs and the great examples. Chris was really the hero in terms of finding absolutely fabulous WPA primarily projects for us to evaluate. I think once we came to a full understanding of just how splendid some of these created landscapes were, it made it a lot easier not to shed too many tears over the stray culverts that that we were evaluating and not finding to fully convey the incredible life-changing nature of these New Deal programs. So I hope I haven't overwhelmed anyone by repeating the same acronyms over and over again until I could hardly get them out of my mouth. But thanks again for your time and attention today. And if you think of questions, or as you look this over, have observations or thoughts on how it could be improved or might need to be fine-tuned, we're certainly open to input from all of you. And I hope we've done our best work in making it straightforward and hopefully logical as how it would be applied in the field. But thanks again for your assistance all the way along the process and for tuning in today to share this discussion with us.
Thank you.
And I will add that next steps, the guidance document and the checklist will be publicized in a blog. There'll be, I think the draft that you got today is close to final, but there's still some revisions that are needed. They're very minor. So then they will all go up on our website. And I think, they're living documents. If we find that we need to tweak them or update them, we'll do that. But this is sort of the end of our 2-year span of work under this task order of the work plan. So thanks for all your help, especially to Chris and Kara and Heather on this effort. And Pam, thank you for everything you put into this. So.
I should just add one more thing. I hope no one is like freaked out by the inclusion of the potential historic roadways information. I felt that we needed to address the question of whether these properties, these resources could be on historic roadways, but because the evaluation efforts for the numerous named highways and other things have never really happened on a large scale basis, I guess I wanted to make sure that I was sharing the information because I thought it was useful to have, but I don't know that we're necessarily anticipating that that the evaluation of every small scale resource would result in a review of the significance of an entire named highway. And some of those named highways have been named and renamed so many times. Just describing them became a little bit of a challenge. I was surprised how many historic names Route 6 has. It was honoring any number of different individuals, and it's a really cool and important road. Is it National Register eligible? And if so, what segments? Those are big questions that I don't know that we would anticipate the review of small individual resources to answer. But I think having some awareness that these were historic routes that had significance in the early 20th century, we thought it was important to include just as sort of background understanding of the location where you will be discovering resources or documenting resources. So thank you for not freaking out over that. I expected 10 questions saying, "Are you crazy?" So thank you. Well, maybe we're done if we have put everyone into a state of stunned silence here. But we will look forward to further discussions on this exciting topic in the future. Thanks again, all of you, and goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank
Pam.
you, Pam. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam.